Well, hello everybody. I have 3:30, so we are going to get ready here for the third and final installment of our mini sessions. And this last block of mini sessions, the focus is going to be on successful habits and behaviors for college student success. So we have 5 awesome presentations that are going to wrap up the day here. And our first presentation is going to be coming to us from Landmark College. Tabitha Mancini will be talking about preparing to learn online. So Tabitha, if you want to, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and I will share my screen here and we will go ahead and get started.
Great. You could go back to the first cover slide. There we go. Awesome, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this presentation on preparing to learn online for those with LDs and ADHD. As mentioned, I'm Tabitha Mancini. I'm the Director of Outreach for online programs, specifically online dual enrollment at Landmark College. So online learning is another distinct environment and takes preparation just as it does in other learning environments such as in-person physical classroom learning, and as in the difference in the learning environment between high school and college. So this is important to recognize for many people, but especially those with ADHD, as the manifestations of ADHD are highly variable depending on the context. And I'll just, before we go on to the next slide, I'll just preface that this presentation, we could be here all day together, unpacking the content of these slides, but we have 15 minutes, so we'll get started. Okay, so just our quick agenda here is, I mentioned it from Landmark College. Landmark College is specifically for students with learning disabilities, ADHD, and autism. And we have been around since, for those of you who don't know, 1985, and we're in Putney, Vermont, in southern Vermont. We have one of our many programs is a online dual enrollment program, which allows high schools, juniors, seniors, and gap year students to access and take our college courses early. And so again, in their latter years of high school and the gap year. So first things first. Determining your purpose for taking an online course, and we'll talk more about that. And then we'll go into 5 key elements to prepare and to prepare for online learning and to be a successful online learner. So determining your purpose. The first thing that we really recommend is be explicit. So it's important for the learner to explicitly determine why they want to take a course and what they hope to achieve. So really setting those goals. So those are intentions. They also will help in reflection and metacognition building. And it's a nice handrail for conversation also, and keeping on track between educators, parents, and students. Next slide. So online classes, students will take an online class for many different reasons. And it's not just getting a degree, it could be self-exploration. So early exposure to college, which helps in the college transition between high school and college. So it definitely helps in priming a student. They get that experience navigating a learning management system, everything that goes into college coursework and learning online. And there's also economic benefits. So it can be economical to take a college course while in high school rather than, and also exploring one's interests in high school or during gap year, rather than waiting to determine some of those things while you're in college can be expensive lessons. All right, so study habits. I'm just going to move my view over here. So establishing study habits, managing distractions. So we all know this is really important, but it's very, very important in an online environment where you have a lot of time to yourself, where you really have to self-manage. So figuring out how to do that and thinking about that prior. Again, a lot of this is being very intent and explicit with oneself. Designating a quiet learning space. Some people have the opportunity to have an office like I do. Others have a space that they can maybe carve out at certain times in a household. It really just depends on the learner, but being able to designate that and communicate that with others in your household is really important. And then making a plan and setting a schedule. So making your plans to when you're going to study, when you're going to do your coursework, when you're going to be interacting with other students online, if there's group projects, and then setting a schedule. Actually sitting and looking at your days, your week, and setting in time, specific times that you're going to be doing these things and interacting online versus like, oh, it's online, I'm just going to get on and do it when I can, because that can get one really off track. And then doing the easiest tasks first. So when you're going through your coursework or you're opening up, your laptop and you're looking at all the things that I have to do for this course, there's a great sense of achievement if we can just go and kind of knock some of the easier ones out first and then leave the others where we can really then start kind of chunking information in those big projects. So communication skills, get unstuck and ask for help. So many students will keep quiet and they're not sure, and sometimes we're not sure of what we're unsure about and how to exactly identify that. But that's okay. So what we do is just and suggest is reach out to whomever, whether that's your we have course advisors, but your instructor, whoever is, if you have a resource person or disability services person, whoever is in your support network, just reach out to somebody and say, hey, I'm stuck and I'm not really sure where to go or get unstuck. And then just asking somebody for help and help you to work through it is really important. And actively participate. So jump in and start sending emails to your looking at who's online, your classmates, and saying hello, introducing yourself. And then there's often communication boards, making sure to be, the first one to post or really, really close, not waiting till the weekend to make your posts. Send an email to introduction to your instructors. Now, this is a really good habit to get into when you're face-to-face as well, but also when doing the same thing, but via email in your courses helps to establish rapport with your instructors. And checking your email regularly, especially online, because most of the communication is done through email. So checking your emails every day and being really intent and purposeful on looking every day for emails that relate to your course. And of course, be respectful, professional, and polite. So though it's on email and the tendency is to quickly write something, maybe it could be without punctuation to get back to somebody, it's still a learning environment and these are still your colleagues and peers. Self-direction. So know your resources and be diligent. And I had mentioned about who's in your support network. There's lots of different resources available in online learning, and some of those have to do with the learning management system, so your technology, which I'll talk about later. But know who those people are. So it's an instructor, maybe there's the online program, the school that you're with has additional support, such as a librarian that you can talk with online. Don't need to go in or even call them, but you can chat with them. There's lots of different resources. So just actually make a list of who those are. And then build in time to organize and make adjustments. So it's not enough just to organize, but there's always adjustments that one makes in the learning process. And so making time, carving out time to actually readjust is also really important. And then choosing a calendar, whether that be paper or electronic or a combination of the two. It could be a combination, it is for me. But thinking about that ahead of time, and sometimes you may need to make adjustments as you're figuring out what is the right fit for you. And create a list of assignments by due date. And so listing out the actual calendar days and then the assignments. And know where and how to turn in your assignments. And academic honesty is incredibly important. So it is part of the learning process. So it's always important for parents and students to be on the same page with this. Understanding technology, understanding all the technical requirements. So looking at the tech requirements before you start the class and making sure that your computer and everything, the accessories line up with what you'll need. And then using the video conferencing. So actually being online, if there's a group meeting, turning on your camera and testing is important. So always ensure that you have your stable internet connection and test that. Especially well before a class session if it's live, and explore assistive technologies. There's all sorts of assistive technologies that can help. And then again, test your technology and know who to call for technical help. So there is a difference between reading online. I know I'm running out of time, so I'll just go with this quickly. There is a difference between interacting with printed text and reading online. And one of them is managing distractions like pop-ups and emails. So it's really important to close out those programs as you're reading. Learn why and how to annotate and take notes. So it's also important to know why the importance of annotating, not just how, but why it's important. And then make sure to use reading software, explore that, and that could be helpful. Aha, did it, got through. So please reach out to me. A copy of this presentation as well as a infographic poster is available to you. And if you want to print a copy of that, it's 11 by 14 poster. Please reach out to me directly and happy to send one to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Tabitha. That was great. Wonderful presentation. Our next presenter is Christina Crowe from Denver University, and she's here to talk to us today about 3 tips for college success. So Christina, if you want to go ahead, you can unmute yourself, and I believe you're going to share your screen with us. And go ahead and take it away.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for having me with you all here today. I hope you guys are seeing what I'm seeing. The slideshow, 3 tips for college success. That's what I want to share with you today. My name's Christina Crowe, and like she just shared, I'm the resident executive functioning specialist at the University of Denver. I'm part of what is called the Learning Effectiveness Program, and we support neurodiverse learners on our campus. I also provide executive functioning, coaching, and consulting through my own business, Remind Brain Training. So my background, I help individuals understand their neurodiversity, provide executive functioning skill development, and help individuals target and enhance their academic skills so they can find success. So what I wanted to share with you is some of the tools that I share with the individuals I work with in the college environment. And that's 3 tips for college success that include executive functions, research-based strategies, and comprehension techniques, and how you can use these to find success in the college environment, ace your exams, get the grades that you want in your classes. So I hope you find this valuable. The first tip is intentionally develop your executive functioning skills. So a lot of people don't often think about their learning and development. They're thinking about what they're learning and not how they're learning it. So my first tip is to get to know your own executive skills, what executive functioning skills are, and then what your own personal level of skill set is in these different areas. So executive functioning skills are considered the cognitive control center of their brain. This is the center of all of your decision making, your reasoning, thinking, and judgment. These are the skills we use to accomplish all the goals and objectives we have. These are the skills that we use to make connections and problem solve. This is the brain's main association area. And strangely or sadly, however you may look at it, this is also the very last part of the brain to develop. So as you're entering in college, you're still in the process of developing your executive skills. So that's why it's so important for you to understand these skills, how you're using them, and which areas you might need support in. So just briefly, I'm going to give you an overview. Executive functioning can be broken down into two categories: thinking skills, and then on the other side, you have emotional management. So in the thinking skills, college asks a lot of these skills. So this has to do with how you're thinking about your own thinking and studying and reasoning and development and how you're solving problems. Your working memory, how you're memorizing and problem solving and working with information and learning new information. How you're planning, prioritizing, using systems and techniques, some of the ones that were described before, to organize your time and manage all the different competing responsibilities that you have. So as you go into college, be thinking about all these different skills and the areas that you might need extra support in, the different tools and techniques or organizational strategies, reminder tools that might be helpful to you. Also think about your emotional management skills. So these are the skills that we often don't think. These are the skills that help you manage both your internal and external worlds. So this has to do with initiating or starting assignments, right? When they might feel overwhelming or hard to accomplish. Being able to inhibit your response or attention and what you're paying attention to or focusing on. Being mentally flexible when challenges come up or things change at the last minute, and doing all of this in order to accomplish all of your goals and objectives. So the research shows that individuals, and especially college students, really benefit from intentionally developing and focusing on these skills. It makes you a better learner and makes you a better student in general. So that's that first tip, is to become familiar with these executive skills and the how of your learning, not just what you're learning. And if you need additional resources, please think of me as someone that you can come to get resources or to direct you in the right way to get the supports that you need. So college tip number 2 that we're moving on to is to use research-based study strategies. So what's so interesting, students come into college and they often think that studying is something that happens right before the exam, right? At the end of the quarter or semester or at midterms. And the truth is that research shows us that studying is something that we should be thinking of as happening continually throughout the quarter or semester. So some of the research-based strategies that you could use is distributing your practice. So practicing the material and reviewing the material that you're learning weekly, daily, as you're learning it. Use practice testing. Make sure that you're quizzing yourself and questioning what you know and how much you know. Finding those holes in your knowledge and focusing on that. Using elaborate interrogation. And that's not just simply accepting every fact that you're giving and trying to remember and recite it, but asking and answering why that fact is true. How can you apply it? Why is that pertinent? What can you do with it? Using self-explanation. And this means simply putting things in your own words, being able to explain them using your own language and not just reciting directly what you're reading in the text. As well as using interwoven practice. So don't just cram and study right before the test on one subject. Instead, make sure that you're constantly flipping back and forth from different subjects. You're spending 1 or 2 hours on each subject each day to kind of freshen up that knowledge. So that's that second tip, is to make sure that you're thinking about studying as something that happens continuously, and you're using those research-based strategies to get the most effectiveness and efficiency. So the very last tip that I want to share with you is to use active learning strategies. So this is something else that I often see among students, is that they think that learning is something that happens passively, right? They just read the material, pay attention in class, and that you're naturally going to learn the material. but really that's not the truth. Reading and rereading lectures, that passive learning strategy, does not achieve the optimal results that you want to get. And that's because it creates this sense of familiarity with the material. You're not really gaining deep understanding or taking in or processing what you're learning. Instead, you're just simply like letting it go through you, and you're not taking in and comprehending and categorizing and understanding it. So instead of creating that false sense of mastery that's misleading you, and doing these passive strategies. So examples of these are like rereading material, just simply highlighting all the material, or just listening to the lectures passively. Those are passive learning strategies. Instead, we want to slow down and realize that learning is an active process of meaning making. You want to synthesize and summarize and investigate and try to utilize and share and reflect on the knowledge. That's where the real learning is taking place. So the goal is not just to understand or simply like, oh, I get that information, but to be able to really articulate and justify your learning and understanding and how that applies. So some examples of this, just so you know practically how to go into class and start being successful, is when you're reading material, slow down and make sure you're summarizing each paragraph or each section. Annotate and outline the important facts. Ask questions about what you're reading. Draw parallels between other sections and your personal experience. How are you going to apply this in your profession or your craft? Intentionally and selectively highlight only the most important concepts and take time to deduce what that is. What is the professor asking you to understand? And what are you really supposed to be taking away from this? What are those big ideas? Take time to pause during lectures. A lot of students are spending so much time note-taking and capturing every word, when really you need to take time to pause and question and make connections between your learning. Make sure you're really capturing and taking in that information. So an easy way to do this is those low stake tests, like quiz yourself, test yourself, go to office hours, use tutoring to use this as practice to see how well you're really understanding the material. Test your comprehension. When you're in class, use active comprehension strategies. So this means activating your background knowledge. What do I already know about this subject? What am I coming in the lesson? What did we do last lesson? How does that connect to that? Make sure that you're asking questions. If you don't have time to ask all the questions within the class, make sure that you're writing these things down and sending those to your professor afterwards. Ask yourself questions. Do you believe what the professor is saying? Is their perspective one that you agree with, or do you have a contrary perspective? Make connections to other things you're learning about and what you're doing in your life. I always identify the big idea or that purpose behind the learning and isolate the big takeaways or the main ideas. Make predictions, how you're going to use this, what's going to happen next, why you think you're being taught this information. Recognize the sequence or patterns. A lot of times too, when you're learning, professors will have certain patterns in the class, like they're always having readings on one day and then the other day asking you to express that knowledge. So recognize that pattern and use it to your advantage. So you're focusing your learning in those directions. Synthesize and summarize, always put it in your own words. Compare and contrast from different things that you've learned and how that connects. Make inferences. How are you going to use this? What are you going to do with this information? Distinguish that fact from opinion. What are the things that you're learning are really facts and based on knowledge and research? And what is simply an opinion or a perspective of someone else? And learn how to argue those perspectives respectively so that you can gain knowledge from seeing other sides of things. And be able to visualize, synthesize, and apply everything you're learning. Please don't forget that when you go to college, you're doing this to enhance and develop and take on skills to be able to apply this later in life, in your career, in your craft, and what you want to do. So always be thinking about what is that takeaway? How am I going to learn this? Or what am I going to do with this information? And how am I going to apply it later? So those are my big three functional tips for college that I help students develop all the time, and I see them finding a lot of success with. So I hope that you guys also learn to utilize and apply these strategies. So just to summarize, first, to get familiar with and understand your own executive functioning skills and the how of learning. To use research-based study strategies for efficiency and effectiveness, and use those learning strategies for comprehension. And I can be a resource for you if you want help with this, finding resources or getting more support as you enter in college or go into the college environment. So please feel free to contact me and think of me as a resource, as well as consider DU, the University of Denver. If you're looking for a college that supports neurodiverse learners, please consider them. And I can be a contact for you on that front too. So thank you so much. I don't know if there's questions or time for that, but thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Christina. That was a wonderful presentation and full of great information. I don't see any questions, but if anybody still wants to put them into the chat, we can make sure we get those to Christina. So thanks again for your presentation. So next up, we have Ellen Bunn from Appalachian State University. And she's going to be talking to us about a really great topic, email etiquette. So we're going to go ahead and switch over. If you want to stop sharing yours, and I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. All right, Ellen, go ahead, take us away.
All right, groovy. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about email and communication with your professors. This is something that is historically, in my experience with students, something that they find really intimidating, something that can be a little bit nerve-wracking, especially coming fresh out of a high school or coming into a really big university, or just talking to people who are your teachers can be really intimidating. So I'm going to talk to you about how you have the power, you can do it, you can be your own superhero, and talk to your professors. All right. So like I just said, can be really intimidating, but it is a hugely important, it is super important, get it, the superhero theme. And if you are training, practicing, and planning for these interactions, they'll go really well. So just like a superhero does, you're going to be kind of thinking about how you want these interactions to go, what the best strategy is for tackling this big villain of communicating with your professor, and then also executing that plan well. So you are going to learn to do that in my session today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about some the three big tips that I have for navigating these tough communications with professors. All right, so my first tip is ask early. So something that I have seen frequently is that sometimes the intimidation can kind of cause students to not communicate when they maybe should. And so, for example, let's say you look in your grade book. At Appalachian, we have a system called As You Learn. You may be using a system like Google Classroom or Moodle, anything like that. But let's say you look in your grade book online and you notice something that's not quite right, or you notice something that might be a little incorrect or a little odd, something that just kind of draws your attention. Ask about it. Don't wait until the end of the semester when your professor is bombarded with communications from students about their grades. Go ahead and get that addressed right away. It's going to be fresh on their mind, and you're going to be able to nip any sort of concerns in the bud super early. The same goes for if you don't really understand what might be going on in class. Ask about it. If you leave the classroom one day and you're like, gosh, that was a really tough lesson, or I'm not quite sure that I understand that 100%, ask about it. Don't wait too late. Just like a superhero, you want to show up before the emergency or right when the emergency happens, so that you can rescue that situation. And this superhero wants to tell you that communicating often with your professors helps them know how you're doing and what you need. And so a great example of that is I had a student who this semester had a pretty significant thing happen in their life. So they were not able to turn in one of their projects on time. And so what they did was fantastic. This student emailed their professor when they realized that this was happening and that they weren't going to be able to submit that work on time, explained what happened and why they weren't going to be able to get it in on time, and then asked for an extension on that assignment. The professor was really kind and flexible and said, yes, absolutely, I fully understand. Or, maybe we need to get a doctor's note or something just so I have confirmation of this. But yes, you can have an extension. And then what happened was, things kept coming at them, life still happens. You still are in other classes. You still have assignments that are due. And the extension kept getting pushed back just a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And so what the professor and the student agreed to do, because they had this great email communication with each other, is that they agreed that that the student would turn it in parts. And so the professor would update the grade as they turned it in. So they turned in the first quarter of the assignment and they got a perfect score on that. They got a 25%. So it was showing a 25% in the grade book. They turned in the next chunk and they had a 50%. Then they turned in the next chunk and they had a 75%. And all of that happened because the student communicated with their professor well and often. All right. So my next slide here is about being prepared. We know that superheroes have to be prepared. You have to have all your gadgets. You have to have your costume, your uniform, and you have to know where you're going. You have to be prepared for that event. So here is my suggestion to you guys. Look for answers before you communicate with your professor. I actually, in my syllabus for classes I teach, have a 3 before me policy. That means that you need to check the syllabus, you need to check our online resources, and you need to check with a classmate or with your email before you even contact me with your question. Odds are that a lot of the information you're trying to hunt down is somewhere. We just need to find it. And then if you can't find it, that's a great reason to go to your professor. So double check the syllabus. This is kind of like the manual for your class. Check your online resources, really comb through it, make sure you can find the answer on your own, maybe even ask a classmate. A lot of times, at least in As You Learn, you're able to see who's in your class and contact them outside of class. And then also check your email. Sometimes professors will send you information that you need to know about class in your email before class. A great example of this is at Appalachian, we occasionally will get a really awesome snow overnight. And so students, I have seen it happen every single semester. I have a student that wakes up for their 8 a.m. class, trudges through the snow in the cold, gets all the way to class. There's no one there. And they're like, what is going on? And then they check their email. Their professor snowed in, canceled class. And so they got up early, trekked all the way across campus and didn't need to. Also, prepare before you chat with them. So having an idea of what you need to ask them in mind, kind of preparing for that, is a really great idea. It is a lot easier for your professor to answer specific questions than it is to answer an I don't know question. So saying, I don't understand what's happening in class is a lot less clear to your professor what you need help with than if you say, hey, can we review chapter 12 again together? I had a really hard time with the theories, or I had a really hard time with following the formula, or I had a really hard time understanding this historical event for that particular class. All righty. And my next tip here is to be professional, respectful, and polite. This is a huge, huge way to show your professor that you are taking this seriously. It may have been really cool in your high school to call your teachers by your first name, and that might be cool in college, but it also might not be. I've interacted with professors who find that really bothersome. They don't like being called by their first name. And so when in doubt, use their last name, and you can email them and you can say, Dr. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so. Unless otherwise told, address your professors as Dr. or Professor blank, okay? Also, if you guys arrange a meeting or appointment through email, make sure that you're on time. They've made time for you in their day. And so it's really important that you show professionalism, you show up on time. And so what that might need, or what you might need to do in order to make that happen, is double check where their office hours are, or maybe go a few minutes early just so that you can plan for some unexpected events. For example, maybe you got, blocked in the tunnel, or if you're driving to campus, you got behind a bus or something like that. And then you're also going to use proper email etiquette. And you want to use proper email etiquette every single time that you reach out and talk to your professors. Email for your professors is not the same as texting, okay? They are expecting a high quality type of communication when you email them. And it also helps them, it helps you show them that you really care about what they think, and that you also really care and want to take this seriously. So in my next slide, I talk about the formula, the secret formula for a super duper email, okay? So the first thing you're going to do, and I'm going to show you an example in just a second, so hang in there. But the first thing you're going to do is you're going to have your greeting. Okay, this is a really important part. Hello, Dr. Blank, or good morning, Mr. Smith, or hi, Dr. or Professor Bunn. And then what you're going to do is you're going to have a short introduction. I recommend including your first and last name and the course you're in. And the reason I say this is because sometimes professors will have hundreds and hundreds of students in the same semester. If they teach 3 100-person lecture courses, that's 300 students that they have on their radar that semester. And they might not know exactly who you are, which is going to be a big change from high school when your teachers know a lot about you. So what you're going to have to do is tell them who you are and what class you're in. They may not know right away. And then also you're more likely to get a quicker response because they don't have to look you up, okay? Then you're going to wait, you're going to ask your question, or you're going to make your request. And you're going to be polite, but really clear. Make it obvious what you need from them, okay? Be really direct. I need to review this chapter, or I would like to double check this grade, or I would like to, I need help getting a study group together. Would you be willing to help me with that? Then what you're going to do is you're going to thank them. Even if you're not super thankful, tell them thank you. Thank them for your time. Let them know that you appreciate them. I always like to tell students, you are, and this is a phrase my grandma and my mom used to use with me, you are more likely to catch flies with honey than vinegar. And so if you are polite and thankful in your email, they are much more likely to help you than if they think you're being upset with them. And then you're going to sign off. You're going to sign your name. You use a kind of a sign off word here, like thanks or best or sincerely, anything like that. So in my next slide, I have a few more tips before I show you an example. So again, just to reinforce this, this is a really big important one, especially if it's a huge class. Put your name, put the course number in the subject line or in the body of your email. Sometimes professors are not able to get back to you right away. So wait 2 to 3 business days being Monday through Friday, for a response, and then follow up. If you email them at 8 o'clock at night and then check your email at 8 a.m. in the morning and they haven't gotten back to you, it's probably that they haven't seen it, not that they're ignoring you. Give them a little bit of time, unless it's urgent, and then maybe go to office hours and see if you can work something out with them. Also use correct grammar and proofread all of your emails. If you don't have Grammarly on your laptop or your computer, download it today. This is going to be a game changer. Make sure that you are using good grammar and proofreading all of your emails. That means everything that needs to be capitalized is capitalized. You're using commas, punctuation, and just, strong grammatical skills. I also like to give students this little warning. If you are upset with your professor, give yourself 1 day before you send them that email that you really want to send them, okay? Give yourself about 24 hours to what I call noodle on it or think about it, and really decide if that's how you want to communicate with your professor. We have saved a lot of student things as a result of this tip right here. Just give yourself a little bit of time to cool off before you send that really strong, really worded email. You also may want to consider I statements. I like to answer this I like to go over this just because it's really helpful for students to think about how they're communicating to the professor and how the professor is perceiving them. So for example, a statement like, "You don't make sense," or "you are confusing," is a lot stronger and may put a bad taste in your professor's mouth, so to speak, than an I statement of, "I am a really strong learner when I have materials like printed out for me, or when I have the slides beforehand. Is that something you would be willing to help me with?" Or, "I really need help understanding these sorts of things that you covered in class." And then again, when you go to communicate with your professor, bring your notes or bring questions with you. All right, so this is a great example of an email that I think follows the super special secret formula for email success. Okay, it starts with a greeting, "Dr. Smith." Okay, using doctor, using the correct prefix there. "My name is John Doe." The student stated their name. They stated the class that they're in. "I'm in your English 101 class." And then they also stated, this is above and beyond, the days and the times that they're in class. "Mondays and Wednesdays at 12 p.m. That teacher knows exactly which class you're in, exactly when they would see you next. "I'm having some trouble getting started with my research paper for your class." Again, using an I statement there. This is something that I need help with. "I'm emailing to ask if you have any available time this week during your office hours to clarify a few questions I have to discuss my paper topic." So a very, very clear request. So the professor is going to know exactly what the student, John Doe, wants to come and talk about and why. Okay, and then we got a sweet sign off here, a little honey at the end. "I think talking with you will really help me break through my writer's block. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to hearing a response from you soon. Best, super person." So I have some templates that will be in the toolkit for some other emails about how to ask about a grade or how to have a difficult conversation, anything like that. But to summarize, I know that a lot of what you have been doing so far in your academic life as a high schooler has been really centralized about teachers you're familiar with, and then maybe even your family or parents being a huge advocate for you. In college, that's a big change, and you have to do your own rescuing. You have to be able to be your own hero. So be confident, be prepared, be on time, be professional, but also be yourself. And you're going to have a great experience. So if you have questions, if you would like me to proofread an email for you, if you would like to talk through a difficult conversation with a faculty member or a professor, please send me an email. I'd love to chat with you. And also kudos to SlidesGo for this super presentation format. So thank you guys. Any questions for me? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. All righty.
Thank you so much, Ellen. You did a wonderful job. That was great, and definitely something that all of our students will be using at some point in their college career. So we're going to move on to our next presenter, which is Laurel Mason from University of Arizona. And she's here to talk to us today about semester on a page. So Laurel, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, and let me go ahead and get us presented and go for it.
Great, thanks so much. And I just want to say that all the presentations before this have been great and exactly what I would have said, on those topics too. I think that this one will actually tie into some of what Christina said and some of what Ellen said, because I'm going to take the executive functioning skills that you do need to develop as you go through college and kind of give you a tool that can help you do that. And then as Ellen said, that the syllabus is the manual for your class, this tool heavily utilizes going back into the syllabi for your classes. So I'm Laurel Grigg Mason. I'm with the SALT Center, which is the Strategic Alternative Learning Techniques Center, and we're at the University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona. So go ahead. So I want to talk first about effective elements of time management. And there are three main ones. The first one is long range planning. I think you might have to do a few clicks, Danielle. Go ahead and just like load this whole page because it looks like they're kind of going out of order. Okay, so we have long range planning, which can be something like a monthly calendar, or if you are in a school setting where you have a specific term, like a semester or a quarter, a calendar can be specific to that term length. Then we have mid-range planning, which is typically something like a weekly calendar that shows us a daily schedule, what we have to do at different hours on each one of the days. And then the last element would be short-range planning, which is typically like a daily to-do list, the things you have to get done that day to accomplish the things that are on both your weekly calendar and your monthly calendar. Okay, next slide. We're going to focus mainly on the long-range planning because that's what the semester on a page does. And the benefits of this long-range planning are that it helps us physically see the future. We know what's coming up. Long-range planning helps us to then utilize those mid-range and short-range tools so that we can structure our weeks and structure our days. It also relieves anxiety trying to remember all of those important dates that are coming up in the future. Even though we focus on our semester on a page primarily for classes, we encourage students to put personal things that they know will impact their ability to study and do their coursework on their semester on a page as well. And that way they don't have to remember that date of, their aunt or cousin who's getting married. It will be on their semester calendar and they just get to look at it and see it along with all of the other important due dates. There are challenges with long range planning though. And that is that it takes time to set up. When we do these with the students in our program at the beginning of the semester, it can take, for some it's a half an hour, but it can take up to 2 hours or sometimes 2 sessions with students to get everything put onto the calendar, depending on how busy each one of their classes is. Our semester planners or semester on a page, it also doesn't include everything. When you're in college, there are certain things that are just a given that you have to do every week, things like weekly reading. All of your courses are going to have readings that you have to complete by each class period. And so we don't typically put those on the semester on a page because it's just a given. You just need to be looking at the syllabus and looking at what you have to read. And it would make the semester on a page very long to include all of those little items that are just regular requirements. When you make a calendar like this, you also have to look at it regularly. We can make beautiful, brilliant calendars, but if you're not actually looking at it, it doesn't help very much. And then the last thing is that these long-term calendars require maintenance because things change. Okay, next slide. So I just want to give you a picture of what a blank SOAP, we shorten it to SOAP because semester on a page is a bit of a mouthful, but it stands for SOAP. This is what the blank one for this very semester looked like for us. And so you can see that we included some important dates related to the university, such as Labor Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving holidays. We also put family weekend and homecoming in there because that typically those typically include a lot of activities that students are involved in, or family or friends who are traveling in from out of town. And then we have days when finals start and other things like that. So it's mostly blank. So if you go to the next slide, let's start building the SOAP. The first thing we have to do is gather all of our course syllabi. It can be electronically, or you can print them out if you want. And then for each course that you have, we want you to choose a short abbreviation that will help you remember which course you're referring to. So go ahead and advance. This is one student's actual SOAP. And so she chose these abbreviations because they made sense for her. She has 3 psych classes. And so the first one, because it was a lab, she just called it lab. The 2 at the bottom, she knew them by their course numbers. So she just went with 383 and 326. And then she had a history of education class and a marketing class, which she did BNAD because that's kind of the term for all the business administration classes on our campus. And so BNAD just really worked for her. Once you've done that, then you want to look at those syllabi and learn the structure of each course. And so if you advance, that can be things like what counts in your grade. We want to make sure that we get those things down or that we gather those things so we can add them to your semester calendar. There's usually a section in the syllabus too that includes the number of exams, the number of assignments, the papers, the projects. And that way, when you're building out your SOAP, you can make sure if it said 4 tests count in your grade, that you have 4 tests for that class on your SOAP. And then the last thing to do once we have done all of those things is to enter those exam dates and then the due dates for those important assignments, papers, and projects onto our SOAP. And so we'll show you an example of how we do it. And we do this in combination with our students together. So our specialists sit there with the students, we look at the syllabi together, we add them to these calendars together. So again, I shortened this so to make it easier for us to see. This is a blank one, but if you click, we're adding the lab class first. And so you can see for this particular class, it has weekly quizzes on Sunday. And then it also has a lab report that's due every Thursday. And this particular student just wanted to call it the lab. She didn't want to put report in there, so it says lab. It looks like it also clicked and added the history. The history class is a little bit different in its structure. You can see those assignments on Friday, and it looks like it's about every other week there's an assignment due for the history class. Okay, one more. Then we added the BNAD in. And so at least for the beginning of the semester, this BNAD has homework every week. And then you can see that there's a test already on the 27th of August. And then one more. Now, the 2 other psychology classes, the 326 and the 383, the only thing on those syllabi were tests. And so the only thing we were able to add in this kind of short window of time is just 2 tests. So this is what her completed semester on a page looked like. It's really nice to just be able to see like, this is what I have going on this semester. It can really highlight, if you do one more click, those weeks that are going to be maybe particularly stressful or busy for you. The 2 that have the arrows pointing to them, there are 2 tests for the student that week, plus some other assignments. And so what this does is it helps you plan ahead and think, well, if I'm going to have 2 tests to study for, I'm not going to be able to do that back to back or in one night. So I'm probably going to have to start 2 weeks ahead to make sure that I'm giving myself enough time. And if you want, you can even start to add in little notes on your SOAP where like maybe on November 1st, you give yourself a note, start studying for, 3 tests, because there is one like right before, the week before too. So you can start making little notes to yourself on this SOAP as well. Okay, one more. You can also change up the structure to make it visually work for you. I've had other students that I've worked with where they didn't like having each class in a different color, like their brain just really didn't process it. But this one particular student wanted all of his tests highlighted in yellow. So as you can see on this example, it's the same class, but every single test, no matter what the class is highlighted in yellow. And then anything that wasn't an assignment that was worth a minimal amount of points, if it was worth a lot of points, was highlighted in a different color. So the history project, which was a term paper, is highlighted in blue, each one of the steps, when the proposal is due, when the draft is due, and when the final paper is due. And then for the 383 class, it has a book report and the 2 psych classes are highlighted in green. There's a 326 project and a 383 book report, and those are due at the end of the semester. And so that just helps that student see like, that's something I'm going to have to plan ahead for, and they know that they're not going to be able to start that the night ahead. All right. So how do we manage those challenges that come along with this long range planning? I mentioned it before, looking at it regularly, but how do you make sure that you do that? So one tip is you got to have lots of different copies, and that can be electronic. If you click again, you could do it on your computer desktop. You can do it on your phone. You could maybe email a copy to a trusted supporter, a teacher, maybe a family member. If you're working with someone at your college, maybe an advisor or a support specialist. If you're using it in like a Google Doc, you can share that document and then you can have it available in multiple places. It kind of depends on what's your style and what's available to you. Some of our students take pictures of it on their phone, so they always have it on their phone. Let's see, printed copies. I know in this like technical age, we kind of feel like we don't need printouts anymore, but we've had some students who have said that just having like a physical paper copy where they didn't have to get on their computer or get on their phone really helped them. And they put it on their bathroom mirror if they have their own bathroom, or they put it on the door so that they can see it like right when they're about to head out for the day. So think low tech too, printed copies. Next slide. And then the maintenance. Instructors may, and I would say will, add assignments. So you might have to add to your SOAP, change due dates. So you might have to move things around, and cancel assignments or tests. That's a good thing. You don't have to do it. But when that happens, you want to make sure that you update your SOAP right away, because it can, like, you can start planning to take a test that maybe was canceled or moved back 2 weeks without realizing it if you don't keep it updated right away. And if you don't do it right away, it's so easy to forget about it. So that is our tool. That in the toolkit there is a blank copy, and then there's this exemplar one filled out. So use it, play around with it, make it work for you. You can adjust it to a month, you can adjust it to 2 months, or if you're on like a 10-week quarter, you can adjust it that way. But use it. Happy long range planning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurel. That was a great presentation and a really helpful tool that I think a lot of students will find helpful. I don't see any questions in the chat, but if there are any, we'll make sure that we pass those along to you. And we're on our very last presenter. There is one question actually, Laurel. Can you recommend an app for time management?
Oh, that is a good question. I think what we always say is it usually is up to the student to try a few out and figure out what works for them. I mean, in general, we tend to go with the tools that the college provides to our students. So like an Outlook calendar or a Google Calendar, they have access to both just because they're pretty easy to share and pretty easy to use. But there are things that will break down assignments, and their functionality is so different that you really just have to try them out. So I don't have any specific recommendations on that.
Great, thank you so much. All right, and we're on to our next presenter, and it's definitely one that you're going to want to stick around for. So it is Dr. Sarah Williams here from East Carolina University, presenting about course progress records, or what we call CPR. So go ahead, Dr. Williams, you go ahead and take it away.
All right, thanks, Danielle. It's so good to be here, and I'm excited about talking about what I think is a really multi-purpose tool, the course progress record, and as Danielle said, at ECU we call it CPRs. And when we get into this a little bit, you're going to see quickly that there is nothing magical or super exciting about the CPR itself. Spoiler alert, it's a table, but what is actually very powerful is the process that you use to create a CPR. And kind of like the tool that Laurel just described, that semester on a page, that process just ensures that you're taking a very intentional, very proactive, really strategic start to every semester. And that's what's so great about it. And so we'll start there. Basically, what we're talking about with a CPR is something that you will make for every single course at the beginning of every semester. So hopefully by the end of this 15 minutes, you're going to have a tool that you can use to basically accomplish 7 different things. And so I'll take a minute to kind of go over each of those things or each of those ways that we encourage our students to use CPRs. The first one I think is probably the most important, because by the time you finish creating a CPR for a specific course, you're going to have a pretty good understanding about the expectations for that course. You're going to have taken the time to sort of size up the class and see what lies ahead. But at the same time, you will have distilled the information about that course, or at least the critical information that you need to keep on track of to kind of watch your grade in the class, to a 1-pager and kind of an at-a-glance document. The third, and those two things are benefits you can have just by making a CPR. But then as you use it, you can find that you can use it for a lot of different purposes. And I think this next one is my favorite. It's always been my favorite, but now I especially love it since I learned in Ellen's presentation that making a CPR now is actually a superpower, because what you can do is use this, a CPR as an icebreaker with your instructors. I'm sure you've heard a lot how important it is to get to know your instructors, to introduce yourself, because as Ellen mentioned, they have so many students and they really enjoy getting to know each one of their students. But that's up to the student to make sure that happens. But sometimes it's kind of awkward on the first day of class to go in and sort of just introduce yourself out of the blue. And what the CPR does is it gives you a tangible tool that you can hand to your instructor and say, hey, I am really looking forward to this class. I'm excited about what I'm going to learn. I've been looking through the materials that you've given me, and I just want to make sure I've got my head around everything I'm going to need to do. And so I've kind of boiled it down on this piece of paper. Would you look over it and let me know if I've missed anything? Give me some feedback. And then done. You've broken the ice. Your part is finished. And from then on, the instructor's doing the talking and giving you feedback and sharing you really good information about the class. It's also a good tool for working with anybody you may be partnering with to keep you accountable, or to guide you through a course. So let's say you're working with a coach or a mentor or a family member or someone that is kind of helping you keep an eye on everything, helping you make sure you're staying on top of everything, and also somebody that's helping you adjust as needed. This is going to give them the information that they need to help guide you. So it's a great tool to just keep everybody in the loop on how things are going. Another purpose that's really useful with the CPR is just to make sure that we're keeping our eyes on everything in the course. Sometimes I get that out of sight, out of mind phenomenon. And if there's an assignment that's kind of down the road, I might forget to think about it. And if you use your CPRs every week and continue to interact with them week by week, then you can make sure that doesn't happen. And you can make sure that you're watching out for those long range assignments while you're also staying on top of, as Laurel mentioned, those kind of weekly readings or weekly short-term assignments that are going to be in front of you all the time. If you're in high school, you're probably accustomed to your teacher taking a minute, maybe halfway through the marking period, and kind of giving you a progress report, letting you know, all right, this is kind of where you stand in the class. This is how you're doing. These are some things you're missing. And it lets you really kind of self-assess. All right, how are things going? And either make a decision in the class, okay, I'm doing really well. I need to just keep up what I'm doing. Or I'm missing a few things. My grade's not what it wants to be. I need to self-correct here, right here in the middle of the semester, so that I can make sure that I end the class with the grade I want. In college, professors might do that, but they don't usually. And one of the nice things about a CPR is it gives you all the information right in front of you every single week that you can use to give yourself a progress report anytime you'd like. And we really encourage you to be intentional about pausing in the middle of the semester and using this tool to kind of assess big picture how you're doing in the class and where you might want to adjust and where you might want to pat yourself on the back and keep on moving. And then finally, it's a good resource to track attendance, just to watch that for yourself and make sure, you know, it kind of doesn't get away from you. And so those are some of the purposes of a CPR, and we really do think it's a valuable instrument, but only if you interact with it and only if you use it. So let's talk about how to make one. We always recommend that you make a CPR for every course the first week of classes. So let's talk about what you get during the first week of classes. Usually you'll receive a syllabus. A lot of people today have talked about that. You'll often receive some handouts in the class or in the online system. Some of those might go into a little bit more detail about some of your assignments. Most instructors will use a learner management system like Canvas or Blackboard or Moodle to also include class materials, even if the class is being offered face-to-face. Most definitely if it's an online course. Instructors might send emails within the first week communicating to students about class expectations. And usually the instructor is going to do some sort of orientation or introduction to the class. A lot of times that's on the first day in a face-to-face class, or maybe in one of your first modules in an online class. So you've got a lot of different information coming to you from a lot of places. And so sometimes that can be kind of overwhelming and it's hard to know where to start. So let's talk about where to start. What we'll do is start by making a CPR and begin with a blank template. And that's one of the things I like about CPRs. It gives you a very concrete, tangible place to begin and put together all that information, or at least the most critical information in terms of tracking your grades and your progress in the class in one place. So thanks, Danielle. She just put up an example template. As I said before, there's nothing super exciting about it. You begin with a blank table, usually 4 or 5 columns and lots of rows, but it'll give you a tangible resource that you can use to start filling in the blanks. So go to the next slide, Danielle. So the next thing we do is we start plugging in from information. So you take all those documents that I mentioned before, those places of information, spread them all out, read them, look through them, but now you're not reading through them just to get overwhelmed or reading through them passively, but you're reading through them on a treasure hunt, looking for the information that you're going to need to fill in the parts of the CPR. Some of the things that you're going to be looking for to build your CPRs, you can see that there's a column for assignments. So as you sort through all the materials that you've been provided, pull out the information about all your assignments. How many points are they worth? Are things weighted more than others? You know, how often will these assignments happen? And when are they due? Seek out the due dates of all the assignments. A lot of times I'll even add a 5th column on a CPR that's just kind of a notes section where you can take just some basic notes about each assignment. You know, for that midterm, is it, yeah, or that final exam, is it cumulative? What chapters are covered on that quiz? How long is that paper? Or how many parts to that project? You know, real basic information. You can get the more detailed information in the course materials, but this is that at a glance stuff that you need to be able to sort of plan out your semester. You can also see at the bottom a place where you can track your own attendance. So basically you just fill in the dates that you would be expected to attend that class. ECU, our colors are purple and gold, so we use purple to show where we've got holidays and we don't have class, but that gives you a nice space to just keep up with how often you're going to class, which we recommend to be very, very often and not to miss it unless you just absolutely have to. So you've gotten your template, you've read the materials, you've started plugging in the information about each course, but it's not unusual for even after you've done all that to still have some blanks on that form. And that's the perfect time, again, back to that icebreaker, to take that to your instructor and say, okay, I think I've got a good sense of what I need to do to be successful in this course, but I'm missing a few things. Can you help me know where to find those in your in the materials? materials for the course. For example, I didn't find a grade for this particular project. Did I miss something, or maybe it hasn't been assigned yet? Or I wasn't sure where to find the details of this assignment. Are you going to share those with me later? And the worst that can happen in that scenario is that you have missed something. And right there at the very beginning of class, within the first week, you're making a good impression on the instructor, showing that person that you read all those course materials, but they can also make sure that you know what you've missed and that you have a real good sense of what you're going to want to do in that class right from the beginning. And that's fantastic. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the most important thing is that you continue to interact with that CPR throughout the semester. Use it each week as you open up your planner for the week and you start mapping out, all right, how am I going to use my time this week? What am I going to work on? And you can also update your CPRs. And that helps you make sure that you're checking those short-term assignments, but that you're also putting in the time, building toward those longer-term assignments so that everything gets completed on time and you do great on each one. So this is an example of kind of what that might look like. The first CPR you see here is maybe one that would have come out of the first week of classes. And it's just sort of the basic information about the course. And then you can see the student, sort of a mid-semester version of it at the end of October. The student's been tracking their grades. You can see by the red at the bottom, they've missed a couple of classes. So we want to make sure we're not missing any more classes. And they're starting to watch their grades. And then you can see the one at the end, you know, they had that 75 on that quiz in October. They made a little adjustment. All the rest of the grades in the class look great. And they're finishing on in a real high place. So that's kind of an example of how that might progress. And that was just an example of kind of the way one CPR might look. But yeah, I mean, these are very flexible, of course. You can use Microsoft Word, you can use Excel, you can use a piece of paper and a pencil, and organize the CPRs in whatever way it makes sense for you and for the class. There's no magic in the format. It's just a matter of taking that time to look ahead at the class and then to keep interacting with it as you go throughout the course. And so what you'll find, you can skip that page. I think I'm getting close in time, but what you can find in the toolkit is you'll find a template, you'll find several samples, and there's even a book chapter that basically tells you everything I just did with a whole lot more detail that can guide you through the process of creating one of these tools. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was a wonderful presentation about the really helpful tool that we call the CPRs. I know that a lot of students benefit from it here at ECU in their first and second year classes that we have with them. I don't see any questions in the chat for you, but if there are any, we'll make sure that they get to you. And that actually, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And that actually wraps up our conference, the second annual College Star Conference. So on behalf of everybody with College Star, we just really want to thank you and let you know how much we appreciate spending the last 2 days with you and what a wonderful audience and participation you have brought to this conference. So again, thank you for attending. We hope that you took away some really helpful information. And just a reminder, you'll be getting an email with a survey, a link to a survey. Please complete that. And there's a little incentive for the first 10 people that complete that. You'll be getting a $20 gift card. So that's definitely something that you'll want to try to do. And just thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day and please stay in touch.